You're listening to a CNA podcast.
Now, a letter to myself with Joel Chua.
Hi there, and thanks as always for your company. Our guest today is an Australian author and illustrator whose self-help books have been translated into dozens of languages and have sold millions of copies around the world. Andrew Matthews' works are instantly recognizable on the bookshelves. On the cover of pretty much all his books is that illustration of a boy wearing a blue shirt, red pants, with a huge smile, jumping for joy exuberantly. You know what I'm talking about. His books are loved for his cartoons as much as they are for their nuggets of wisdom on happiness, purpose, and resilience. Well, Andrew's career was in fact launched right here in Singapore in 1988, when he launched a book that quickly became a bestseller, Being Happy. Here's Andrew with his journey.
I had a brief stint at law school. I thought maybe I should be a lawyer, but I didn't really enjoy that. And what I loved most of all was drawing and painting. And I studied classical drawing and painting in America for a time. And then I was working as an artist when at 25, I made this shocking discovery. Mm-hmm. I discovered that the happiest people I knew had bigger problems than me. And that made no sense.
Well, what do you mean by that?
I mean, my idea was that when life was easier, people should be happier. But I discovered that so many of the people who seemed to find meaning in life and joy in life had bigger problems than me. And I came across people who had maybe been through serious illness, or they'd gone broke, or they'd even lost loved ones way too soon. One family I remember stuck in my mind, their house had just burned down, and they were one of the happiest families I ever met. I thought, how can this be? And of course, I set about reading books and going to seminars and thinking hard and observing the people around me. And eventually I came to the conclusion that it's not what happens to you, but it's how you think about what happens to you. And so what I wanted to do was learn to think how happy people think. And I spent some time trying to do that. And ultimately that led to my first book, Being Happy.
You were in your mid-20s at that point in time.
I was. And people would often stop me if I was in a bookstore signing books, and they would say, "You seem a little young to be a philosopher." But I was just trying to figure some things out for myself. And as some pennies dropped for me, I wanted to share some ideas that had made a big difference to my life. And Being Happy was a book that I wanted to appeal to people who didn't even like self-help books. Right. So I wanted it to be simple. I wanted it to have easy stories. And of course, it was an opportunity for me to put my own cartoons in the book. The idea, Joel, was I wanted to create a helpful manual for any person, whether this person was a university student, or could be someone working in a government office, could be a teacher or a student. I thought if I can just share some simple, helpful tips in plain language, hopefully with a bit of humor, then I might reach people who would normally not read a self-help book. That was the plan.
Yeah. And the plan worked out fabulously and brilliantly.
Well, in retrospect, it did, Joel, but it was a slow time coming. Being Happy was knocked back by 16 publishers, or 17, before publisher number 18, who was a publisher in Singapore, a small company called Media Masters that I came across by accident after I'd written to many big publishers around the world. And so I ended up coming to Singapore in 1988, and there used to be a wonderful book fair down near the World Trade Center back then. And we launched the book there, and I spent 9 days signing copies and signed 7,747 books that week.
So your career was launched in Singapore.
Well, yes, but then the question was, is anyone else going to like this book? But over a period of 10 years, we took Being Happy around the world.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is amazing. I'm curious, Andrew. You shared with us a little bit about pre-authorhood life for you and how you came to make that decision. Before you made that decision, how would you describe your own state of happiness at that point in time?
Yes, it would be romantic to say that I was terribly depressed. I was doing okay, but I had been blessed, Joel. I had loving parents. I was healthy, and I just feel that my attitude was not very good. So I really felt that I needed to be more grateful for the good things that I had. And so it was really feeling that I had no excuse for not having a much more joyful approach to life. And I thought, well, when I reached the age of 25, I thought, if I'm going to do something about it, I need to do it now. I can still remember the day. It was October the 19th, 1983, where I decided from today I'm going to be happier.
What happened on that day? Why did you make that decision on that day?
I just finally decided that I've had enough of being like mediocre and enough of being a complainer. I adopted a bit of a strategy, which sounds dangerous, but it wasn't really. I adopted this idea for myself, which was, if in doubt, do it. Mm-hmm. If I get invited somewhere, I'll go. If an opportunity comes along, I'll take it. And that, along with a more positive attitude, began to really change the momentum in my life.
The first book that you wrote, of course, Being Happy. What does being happy mean for you?
I would say, number one, it is waking up every morning and being happy with who you are, saying, I wouldn't want to be anyone else. That's an important thing. I mean, it's wrapped up in gratitude. The next thing is that we feel that we are doing something that is meaningful in our life. It may not be our job. It may be that we're trying to raise extraordinary children, or it may be our hobby. But in some way, I believe it's important to feel that we're contributing, that we're making the world better than how we found it. Mm. And the third thing I would say that's so important is to love someone, at least one person, and to be loved. So if we are grateful for where we are and who we are, and we feel that we're doing something that has meaning, and if we feel loved and we can love some people in our life, then that's happiness for me.
Have all those boxes that you've just mentioned, have they been checked off for you personally?
I've been so blessed. My wife, Julie, I met around about the time that I wrote Being Happy. So we've been married now 33 years and known each other for 37. And she has been the most extraordinary publisher, partner, wife, inspiration. So I'm so blessed to have met and come to love and live with Julie. I learn so much from her every day, for her courage and her spirit. And so it's been a journey, and the journey of publishing our books together has taken us around the world. So the joy for me is that every day I receive messages on social media. I receive emails from people who say, your books changed how my life is. Your books, many people just say, your books changed my life. Mm. I don't believe it's my books that change their life. They change their own lives. But if I can highlight some things that can be a guidepost for somebody, then that's a joy.
You've shared a number of times over this conversation how blessed you feel, how privileged you feel, having had these amazing opportunities and wonderful people in your life. To some people, they may find it easy for that person to write about happiness, right? But for individuals who don't feel blessed and privileged at this point in time in their lives, how would you respond to them? When you talk to them about happiness.
Yeah, absolutely fair comment, Joel. It's easy when life is going well to be nice and to be grateful. And I've thought a lot about that, and particularly with the onset of COVID and more recently, Julie's had her own health challenges. And so I've given a lot of thought to how it is that we bounce back when life is not so good. And my most recent book, Bouncing Back, was a response really to that question. How do we rebound from disappointment and disaster? And so given that at some point in our lives, I think for all of us, even though it may be magical at one point or another, all of us go through challenges and heartache and sadness and, many of us financial hardships. So I gave some thought to what it is that we can do. So my contention is that whatever's going on in our life, we can make it better by how we see it and then by what we do. And so step one, I think, is that we, instead of feeling like victims, we say to ourselves, how can I see some purpose in what I'm going through right now, even though it's so difficult? I've got a cartoon in Bouncing Back that says, what you thought was breaking you is probably making you. And many of us go through things that we thought were disasters, but they end up turning us into extraordinary individuals. So that is one approach that we can take when life is difficult. Some of the other things I talk about are living life one day at a time. Very often, what we thought were insurmountable challenges resolve themselves. So that's part of the equation. Also, I think it's accepting what we can't change and changing what we can change.
The quote that you just shared with us, I think that was somewhere at the beginning of the book, right? What you thought was breaking you is actually making you. I'm wondering, is there an experience that you have in your own journey where that idea, that quote, rings especially true?
Well, there's a few, but one that comes to mind is Being Happy was not my first book. I wrote another book before Being Happy. And I'd heard it can be difficult to get published, so I decided that I would, I thought this is a clever strategy. I will get the names of the 60 biggest publishers in the English-speaking world, and I will send them a copy of this manuscript of mine. And then I will, out of 60 publishers, 5 or at least 3 are going to look. And then I will choose the publisher that I want. I thought, that's clever. So after about 2 weeks, I began to get the rejection slips. And soon I had 10 and then 20 and then 35 and then 49 and then 57 and 58 and 59 and 60 and 61. One publisher wrote to me twice and said, forget it. So my first experience with trying to be an author was heartbreaking. And then I wrote my second book, which the second manuscript became my first book. The other one is still in a cupboard somewhere. So in all, Joel, it took me, 60 plus 17. It took me 77 rejections to get a book published.
How did that experience end up making you or building you?
I think I realized that, and I also talk about that in Bouncing Back, is that we learn a lot from failure, and basically it really doesn't matter how many times we fail as long as we keep going.
Mm.
And it's not failure that really crushes us. What hurts most is never having tried.
Yeah.
And if the second book hadn't worked, then I would have written a third one, and hopefully the third one would have been better than the second one.
Mm.
Everywhere, I talk about, for example, Katy Perry. She sold, I don't know, 150 million records, but she was dumped by 3 record companies by the time she was 23. Her first record sold something like 200 copies.
Mm.
Everywhere we look, we see that it's not about genius, it's not about talent, it's not about being brilliant. It's about persistence.
Something absolutely important to keep in mind. And thank you for sharing that experience and that point in your journey when those many setbacks eventually, in hindsight, gave you something so valuable to build on.
And there were and have been so many that even when you're a published author, you will go to bookstores sometimes and there's nobody there, not one person. I went to a speech once in Portsmouth in the UK, drove 3 hours, and there was not one person there. You turn around and drive home. So, you get encouraging and delightful experiences, and you get frustrating and real disappointments.
Right.
And that's true for all of us. You know that. There's another cartoon in Bouncing Back which says, happy people focus on what they have and unhappy people focus on what's missing. And the good thing about gratitude is that you can't be grateful and resentful at the same time. And you can't be grateful and angry at the same time. And as soon as we start to say, what is it that I love about my life? What is it that I have to be grateful for? Then we find more things. And the more that we ask ourselves, what do I love about my job or my country or my boyfriend, or what do I love about where I live? The more things we find. So our happiness is very much a result of the questions that we ask ourselves. To have a happy life, you don't need a lot of stuff. Having stuff never ever gives us peace of mind. I mean, usually when we get stuff, we end up wanting more stuff. And so happiness is not really about accumulating stuff. I think a lot of it is in seeing the goodness in the people around us, understanding that no one's perfect, including us. So we focus on the good points in our friends and our family, and believing life can turn out well. I believe to have a better life, we've got to see it as better. But we become what we think about. We attract what we think about. And so if we see our life as better, if we imagine ourselves as being blessed and loved and finding meaning and enjoying our work, then we move toward the things that we imagine for ourselves.
Andrew, at this point in time, you've shared with us highlights of your journey, especially when that journey started for you in 1988 when you published Being Happy, the book that launched your career in a sense here in Singapore. If you were to look back at the course of your career and your journey, if you could write a letter to your younger self, at whatever age you think that younger version of yourself needed to hear these words the most, what would be in that letter?
If I was to give myself advice, and I would, because the wonderful thing is that one idea can change our whole trajectory. For example, the idea that I share in Bouncing Back is that it's not failure that crushes us. What hurts most is never having tried. Once we embrace that idea, then that can change our whole life. So along those lines, I would suggest that the first thing I would tell myself would be to take more risks. I'm not talking about doing things that are dangerous, but I'm saying that we risk our reputation a little bit. We risk being wrong. when we get to be 85 years old, we're not going to worry about the things that didn't work. We'll be celebrating the things that did work and perhaps reflecting on the things that we could have done, but we didn't, like the vacations that we didn't take, or the times we didn't speak up for ourselves or someone else, or maybe the girl in Starbucks that we could have asked on a date and we were always too scared to do that. So I would suggest to myself that I take more risks because it's okay to fail. I think I would tell myself to be more accepting. There's a myth that says if there's something that you don't like and you don't accept it, then you're not going to be stuck with it. But if you accept something that you don't like, then you're stuck with it. And I think it's the absolute opposite. If there's something in your life that you don't like, but you can't change, the moment that you accept it, then you can move on. I'm thinking of when I was in high school, I was the smallest kid in high school in first year high school. And in second year high school, I was still the smallest kid in the school. And in third year high school, I was still the tiniest boy of all in the school. And that caused me such a lot of stress until one day my mother explained to me that you're only going to be happier when you accept what you can't change and you change what you can change. And the good thing is that we can change a lot of things. We can change our attitude. We can change our work rate or how committed we are. We can change our friends. We can change our plans. So we accept what we can't change and we change what we can. Right. And the other thing I think I would tell myself, Joel, is to live one day at a time. So many things we worry about and they resolve themselves. And yet we might spend a whole life saying, what if this happens? What if that happens? And the future is about what if, and the past is about regrets. And the more, in my experience, the more that I've said to myself, I will do my best until bedtime. And when tomorrow comes, I will deal with it. I found that to be really helpful. To extend that thought a little, Joel, if you were to, and I actually share this idea in Bouncing Back, but if you were to gather together everything that you need to eat in the next 5 years and everything that you need to wear in the next 5 years and pack it all into a big rucksack and carry it all around on your back, we say, how would you get on? And the answer, of course, is that you would collapse. You're not designed to carry that kind of load. But then if you were to gather together a list of everything you need to do in the next 5 years and everything that could go wrong in the next 5 years, you would also collapse because we're not designed to carry that kind of load. But we can deal with 24 hours of food or clothing or things to do. And if we will just do that, say, this is my mission today, I will do what I can, and whatever I can't get done, it's okay.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I will do my best again. Then we relieve ourselves of so much stress.
Thank you so much for that very valuable reminder. The second point in that letter, I was hoping that we could go back to that. And you shared about how it was important for yourself to try to change the things that you can change, but also accept the things that you can't change, right? What was helpful for you in that process to accept the things that you couldn't change?
It's that story of being the smallest kid in school when I was actually in third year high school. And you've got everyone is making jokes every day about, you know, your school bag is bigger than you are. And kids I used to get thrown over the fence. I used to get locked in cupboards. And I didn't really feel like a victim, but I just hated it. And it was only when I decided, okay, this is how big I am and I can't change it. It might change, but I would just deal with it. And so I stopped being angry and frustrated and said to myself, I may be the smallest person in this town forever. Fortunately, I grew when I was about 16, so that made life easier. But it really helped me to understand that idea that there are some things that we can't change. We can't change our parents. So we love them as they are. And our life gets so much better when we say, there are some things that I just accept because they're not things I can change, but so many things we can.
On page 12 of your book, there is this illustration and this quote: "No one is born extraordinary, we become extraordinary, resilient, unstoppable by conquering circumstances we didn't choose."
Yes.
And that's essentially what you've just shared with us, right?
I am. And the story I tell in that chapter of Bouncing Back is the story about, or one of them is the story of my wife, Julie, whose mother died when she was 10. And there's not a day that she hasn't missed her mother since. But at age 8, she was organizing doctors. She was taking her mother to hospital. She was caring for her younger brothers and sisters. And if you ask Julie, what is it that turned her into this force of nature? Julie is Chinese Malaysian, so she's from Kuala Lumpur. So she ran an advertising agency in her 20s. She was a teacher before that. She opened a finishing school in Adelaide to teach Australians how to dress and eat and go for job interviews and things like that. That was what she was doing when I met her. Then she became a publisher. Julie's the reason that my books are now in 48 languages and 70 countries. I tell the story of how Julie once built an orphanage in Indonesia for 150 babies with no money. She just went to construction companies and said, I'm building an orphanage for these babies that have got nowhere to be. And I don't want your money, but I want your bricks and I want your windows and doors and timber. And if you want to, you can come and see the block of land where I want to put up this orphanage. And she built an orphanage without a cent. So as I look at the things that Julie has done and continued to do, I believe, and she believes, that in part she became this extraordinary person because she had things happen to her that she wouldn't have chosen, which is losing her mum when she was 10. So for many of us, things happen. We lose people, or we go through tragedies and illness and financial hardship. We don't get a job that we thought we were destined to get, but we look back and we say, it was that was the defining moment when I became, more than I was. Joel, you've met people who were like movers and shakers and doing all kinds of interesting things with their lives, and they retire. And suddenly their focus changes and they worry about little things that never used to bother them before. Some of those people end up taking 10 minutes to tell you a story that they would have told you in 1 minute 2 years ago. So what I'm saying is, even if we don't continue to have a formal job, if you like, we have to remain involved. We have to remain engaged and connected, because the joy of life continues to be where we are making a difference, where we're contributing, where we're helping, where we are on a mission. And that is where the joy is, but that's also where the perspective is. And there's another thing, and it's a little cruel, but it bears saying, that as soon as we become less useful to those people around us that used to love us and want to be with us, then they very often start to drop away and they don't come and see us anymore, and they find us a little tiring or a little boring, because our focus has become maybe very small and we're not as engaged or as interested, or we don't have a global view, or we're not as excited. So the key to maintaining connection with people that we cherish is also to continue to be on a mission to make our life better, other people's lives better, to be engaged, to be involved. So one way or another, I would tell myself, never retire.
Absolutely. And can I just ask you, Andrew, apart from your books, right? How has that idea translated into other aspects of your life?
I play tennis 3 times a week, ideally at least. I play with 20 and 30 and 40 and 50-year-olds, and I'm older than all of them. I'm 66. So a part of the never retiring is that I work at keeping myself fit enough to that these fellows will still want to play with me. When I was 65, I put up a bar in my garage so that I could do pull-ups. I thought if I set myself a goal, and I couldn't do one when I put it there because pull-ups are hard, and but I thought I need to have a goal, and that's what I seek to do in never retiring from, saying, okay, I'm old enough that I just let my body deteriorate. And similarly, I have grandchildren now, and I value the time that I can spend with them and learning from them, and hopefully I share some things with them that are of value. And I continue to travel. And so what I also love to do, and I'm just rewriting my book, Being a Happy Teenager, which was first released in 2001. So a lot has changed in teenagers' lives since then. So part of keeping young is trying to write a book that teenagers will find relevant and entertaining and useful.
Yeah.
Or rewrite a book. And so we're looking at releasing that towards the end of the year.
It sounds like what you're saying is continue finding challenges to keep yourself motivated, to give yourself a goal to work towards. And that's encapsulated in the idea that you shared with us, never retire.
Yes, it is. And it's also, don't believe what other people may believe about aging. I come across, and you will come across, people in their 60s who just give up. But if you say, I'm not them, other people want to retire or want to just go on cruises for the last 20 years of their life. And I mean, if they're enjoying that, then that's wonderful. But I think even if we can be on that cruise, if we're still doing things to contribute and make the world a better place, however we do it, we can do a lot of things remotely these days, then that's even better.
Andrew, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us and the lessons you've learned through your journey.
It's my absolute pleasure, Joel.
Andrew Matthews, best-selling author, illustrator, and motivational speaker on his journey, finding happiness in his own life and helping others do the same with his books, which have delighted and inspired millions. His latest book is entitled Bouncing Back. You can find out more at andrewmatthews.com. My sincere thanks to Andrew for sharing his story and his journey with us on A Letter to Myself. Thanks so much for listening to this episode. You can subscribe and follow A Letter to Myself on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And leave us a review as well if you liked what you've heard. Till next week, I'm Joel Chua, signing off.